So welcome to this talk. This will be an introduction about GraphQL API and how we did it in one of our projects at Camptocamp. So I'm Yannick Payot. You can see me on GitHub and Twitter with Y Vaucher here. So during this presentation, I will explain you why we use GraphQL, what it is, so give you a bit of context of the project in which we use it. So it's mostly a showcase, an introduction of the module we use that is coming from the OCA. I show you a bit how it is in Odoo with a little demo, and then I will give you some tips on how you could make your own API with GraphQL. So let's get into the subject. So what is GraphQL? GraphQL is a query language which allows you to make your own query with exactly what you want. So the developers that use your API will not, like a REST API, always get the same result. He can ask for specific fields, and he can ask also for a graph of data, which means he can go inside the relation and deep dive into the relation. So how they say in GraphQL is ask what you need and get exactly that. Here you have two examples of so a query here with some objects and few fields that we are asking, and here the result of the query, the data you get back from the API. You will be able to find the base modules that we used in the OCA, which is in the repository REST framework. And this module was made by Axon. Thanks for them for doing that. And this module is based on a Python library named Python Graphene. So more about the project we used this API in. It's a project in Switzerland for a website. So it's really far from a standard Odoo project. It's a project where we don't use even invoicing, we don't use a stock. We use a lot of custom objects. I will get into the detail later. But basically, it's a website and an application to get some tracks for the mobility or non-motorized mobility by bike or hiking. And so if you want to visit Switzerland by foot or by bike, I invite you to go to SwitzerlandMobility and look at the tracks. I'm not paid by the tourism office, but it's a nice way to visit Switzerland. So the project on itself, we used inside it GeoEngine. It's another set of modules you might have heard of in the OCA. So it's to add some Postgres layer inside Odoo, PostGIS inside Postgres in Odoo, so you can display maps with, which is based on open layers inside Odoo. Because in this project, as we have the route for where you go by bike, we store a lot of geodata. So as I said, it's a really custom project where we use Odoo as a framework. We have more than 40 custom objects. And another thing which is really special in this project is that we have a lot of editors. Well, not that much, 55 editors, which are users, but they are shared in 40 companies. So we use a standard model REST company for a lot of users. This is to allow them to edit only some of the data. Because on the workflow on itself, so in this project we have an ETL-like tool in which we gather a lot of data from different tourism office, and we have the editor that change those data. We gather some data from some APIs, and we make some import from some CSV, some JSON files, and so on. And in this, in there, we have a validation and then a publication with a revision system. So the user can have a published version of their object, plus they can go back in draft, still have the published version, which is still saved in the revision system, and be able to modify it for the next version of their object, like the tracks or some photo or so on. And for that, this is a really old project we have at Camptocamp. So we came from a kind of REST API that we had, which was getting a bit old. And so we decided to upgrade that, to have something new, and we wanted to use GraphQL API. The main reason for that is that we have 3 different data consumers that will use our data from that is available in Odoo database. So we expose those data with GraphQL API, which is JSON data. We have some geodata, and we have a lot of image. But here we just share the link to the image, which are stored in Amazon S3 repository. And then we have those 3 data consumers, which take the data and save them in their own database. We have a website, which is the main website with all the information on where you can go buy bike, rent a bike, with nice photo of the path you will go with your bike, and so on. Maybe some hotel you want to rent, and so on. We have another application, which is a web map, which is available from the website, but it's 2 different developers that take the data from there, from Odoo. So they have the separate data. And we have also a mobile application. And by the way, with the mobile application, you can design your own tracks, and if you pay a subscription, and so you have the profile of where you will go and how hard it is, and so on. So this was the main reason why we wanted a GraphQL API, because it's really flexible, and all those different data consumers have different needs. For instance, the web map obviously will use a lot of the geodata, whereas the website don't use geodata at all, because it will be linked to the web map. So let's have a little look at what it looks like. Up here. So we have an Odoo on which I installed the GraphQL API, and this is the graphic interface to make your query. It's really handy for the developers. And you have some So you will start by creating a query, and then you will be able to ask for some data with parameters. Like here, I want that. And if I just run that here, it will pre-fill me automatically. I just clicked on the play button, and it fills me automatically all the fields that are available on this object. So let's change it. So for instance, I'm a developer. I don't want all those fields. Maybe I'm interested only in the ID, the name, and the title, and maybe also the number here. So I can have this like that. I have some standard field here. Maybe now I want to go a bit deeper in the relation, because so this object is a route, so it's a path you will go with by bike or by foot or even with boat or something like that. And we have, for instance, a sub part of the route. We can ask for also information on that. So you see here, I can in one query ask for different items that I have behind the hood in Odoo, instead of making multiple queries on different endpoint. I can make only one query on one endpoint. So this is it, just for a sneak peek of what it looks like, so you know what I'm talking about. So let's get back on track. So as you saw, we were on this endpoint, which is GraphQL, which is a pun with graphic for the graphic interface, which allows you to have auto-completion, auto-documentation of your API, which is quite handy for the developers that will use your API. And simply, when you have done your queries, you just have to remove the I here, and it's a real endpoint, the graphical endpoint that the developer will use or other system will use. Okay, so let's get on how to set up this. First, I want to give an advice on the authentication. There is in the OCA a repository server auth, in which you have a module named auth API key. This will allow you to create in your controller some route with the authentication method API keys. It will also create you a form view where you can create your own key for specific users. And this will allow you simply to make some query, for instance, here with curl. So we have the query here in GraphQL, and here you just pass the API key, and that's it. No trouble with session or things like that. It makes the dev life easier, which we mostly like. So then, how to start on creating our API? First, we have to create a schema. So the schema is the registering of the query we want to allow. In the little demo I did, we just queried one type of object as the base object, then you can give in other object. But here are the one I use, for instance, is this one. So you can provide what are the parameters of those queries, which will be some field types. So in the example, I used the limit parameter to say I wanted only 2, and so on. And then when you have created those endpoints, you will have to define the result method. We will go later in other slide on what are the result methods, which are really important to make your API. And then simply you declare, so you import for Graphen here, and you have, well, we will see, we have in the module created by Axon, we have an object type, an Odoo object type, which will make which will be the helper to make the translation from Odoo to Graphene, so for your GraphQL API. Then, when you have done your list of query you want to be able to do, you will have to define all objects you want to be able to access. Simply, it's creating in Python some classes which are inheriting from Odoo object type. Here I made some interface, so you can create some abstract classes to make some standard behavior. And then you declare your fields. So those are the fields not from Odoo, but those are the fields from Graphene. And then you will have your resolver that will translate from what is in Odoo to what you want to expose in your API. So basically, this is a mapping from Odoo to GraphQL API. So you will declare a lot of different objects. And when you declare some object, you might have some trouble. So this is just a tip I give you because I had some trouble with it. You might have some cyclic referencing. This is a limitation with Graphene and GraphQL implementation. So for instance, you have an object that links to another and the other links in the other direction. In such case, you will want to use a deferred import of the other files. Otherwise, you have a chicken and egg issue. Which one comes first? Well, we all know the egg is first, but that's it. Then, one thing to know also is when you declare your object and you define all fields that are available from your object, by default, GraphQL will translate your field from snake case to camel case. This is the standard, but if you don't like it, you can disable it, or you can get used to it. Now, the important part, which is how is GraphQL finding the data directly? We have those resolvers. So basically, if you just create your model and you link it to an object in Odoo and you declare some fields, it will just try to get the same field on your Odoo model. So if you declare, for instance, a name of type string, basically it will, root is like record, a record set. It will get directly that object, that value. But sometimes you want to do something different. So to do that, you can create your own types of fields. For instance, in this project, we did a translation because we, as in Switzerland, we are a country with 4 main languages. We needed to pass in 4 languages most of the data we have, most of the strings. So all translatable string in Odoo are of type translation here, and we have a JSON format to provide that with each value for each language. And with a new type of field, so you define a default resolver for it, so you don't care about it, you just define it once for the type of field and it will use the same resolver each time. But then you might want to, for some objects, some fields, specific fields, you want to define a specific, really specific behavior because you have maybe a computed field, but you want to get some data or other data. You can define a resolver just by defining a method with the prefix resolver underscore and the name of the field you name, and it will bind them together, nothing else to do on that. Or what you can do is, as an attribute of your field, when you define a field, you can provide the resolver. So if you reuse some resolver, you can share it on different fields. It might be useful. So when I said that we had this object root inside our resolvers, so basically root contains a Odoo environment. This is thanks to the base GraphQL module that you can fetch in the OCA. And so, yeah, you have your standard environment. Either you use it as a record, or you can use it to search whatever you want in Odoo, as you would do in a standard Odoo module. On some tips I can give you on resolvers. Maybe you don't want to your developers that use your API that might not be Odoo developers to have those many-to-many or one-to-many or many-to-one suffixes. So what we did in this project, we just cut them, we removed them, and we made some helpers for that, but yeah. Another things we had to resolve, because it's a bit an Odoo issue on itself, is that for Odoo, it might not know what is false and what is known, because it will use false every time. So for your API, what you want usually is when a relation is not defined, you don't want to give a false value, which is nonsense. You want to give a null value in the JSON. So in this project, as some example of resolvers, as I said, we used the translations resolver. So it looked like this. Here we see the title. Well, one I didn't mess here. So we have this JSON format. So this is just one field, and we check in the higher translation table. We get the data and we expose them through the API. Other than that, we had some, as I said, it's a project with a lot of geometries, some geodata. So we didn't display for complex geometry directly them in the JSON we provide. We created some URL that link to another endpoint to create some GeoJSON or GeoBuff files, which GeoBuff is basically just a way of compressing GeoJSON. And for simple coordinates, it's just XY list of 2 values, and that's it. But for that, we made a new type. So as we have maybe a dozen of different objects with a coordinate, because there are photos that were taken somewhere, there were some point of interest that you can visit, and so on. We just don't want to make the resolver dozens of times. We just do it once and we reuse it. And then we have also really specific things. I forgot to go back in slideshow. We have some ordered relation many-to-many, where we have we don't want to expose the intermediate table, and we have some pass-through fields to say, yeah, just expose that object from there. But we want it ordered, so we made some resolvers that we use in the field attributes that we can reuse a lot of different places. And that's it for my presentation. Any question? Yeah. Maybe you want the mic?
No, I think I can do it. When I was investigating the approach, I was asking and trying to get information myself whether there are specific use cases where GraphQL is really superior to REST API. So, do you have and I didn't, to be honest, I didn't find a clear answer to that. I suppose that the majority of advantages lies in the fact that you just have to do one query for a lot of data instead of calling lots of endpoints for a complex model. But I'm curious to know what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, here the idea was really to, well, some of the fields that we expose might be computed and it might take some time. So if you can ask only for some specific fields, you bypass this computation and you don't need to wait on this. So if you can ask only what you want, to me it's interesting. For the part where you can go in multiple level of the relation, this one I'm not sure it's more efficient. because anyway, well, the Odoo ORM will have to do its work. And it might be also a part of taste, maybe. But if you have a lot of data to share, there is one aspect also which might be interesting, is that you might have less data in your transfer because you only ask for specific things.
So it's about efficiency then?
Yeah,
Efficiency.
yeah, I would say so. Yeah. There was another question?
Yeah, we have one customer who would like to use GraphQL.
Yeah.
But he's not a programmer.
Yeah.
And so what I would like to see is like a module in which he, as a user, can build his own API. Like he
Okay.
can build it just by clicking, maybe he wants this, and then he resolves that and combines it together. I think GraphQL can also take multiple sources and put them in one query. Is there anything you have seen that can do
This was not a requirement for us because we wanted to have the full control on it. So we did it the manual way. I mean, we coded it, each object, each relation we wanted to expose, so we choose it like that. But maybe if you want to make a contribution, you can.
Help me understand. I'm not a developer.
Yeah, sure.
So, is this an exfiltrate data from an Odoo database to an exterior system, or the other way around?
No, it's so this the view I showed you. It's an URL from it's an Odoo which is installed on my computer, and the data I expose here comes from the database of Odoo.
Oh, I see.
So it's exposing the data from Odoo. But yeah, it might be confusing because my project here, we were gathering data from elsewhere, preparing it, and then re-exposing it.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it went outside Odoo, then it came back into Odoo again. The website was the front end of.
No, the website is completely different. It's a different. It's not Odoo at all. Yeah.
I'd just like to confirm that all kind of groups and rules from Odoo are being enforced when the data is fetched. Like there are conditional rules in Odoo to say whether or not the user has kind of more row-level access to the data. Is there filtering going on through this API? Or?
Well, what you could do, for instance, here, as I said, we have a revision system, which basically is having in the same table two versions of the same object, one which is published, one which is not. So we have a filter to say we expose only the revision one, which are the published one. Basically, you have your standard Odoo search method that you can use, and so you can do yourself the filter you want. And yeah, but here, for instance, when I do a limit here, what I do really behind the hood, in the search, I do the Odoo limit in my search. So you can pass also some arguments for some filtering from what input give your users. Any other question? So, thank you. And I don't know who is next.